In the vast expanse of the cosmos, amid the swirling nebulae and the silent dance of stars, there exists a truth universally acknowledged: humans are weird. Not just garden variety weird, but the kind of weird that makes other sentient species develop special protocols just to deal with them. The Galactic Council, a distinguished body comprising representatives from the 17 most advanced civilizations in the known universe, he was having what could only be described as a collective aneurysm. The chamber, designed with elegant acoustics to amplify the most nuanced clicking, hissing, or telepathic projections of its members, was now filled with the chaotic sounds of multiple species panicking simultaneously. Order. I demand order. High Counselor D.U.D.E's translucent tentacles quivered as they banged a ceremonial gavel against the crystal dais. The bioluminescent patterns racing across their skin indicated extreme distress, a rare sight for a being whose species had evolved past emotional displays approximately 12 millennia ago. The humans have achieved faster than light travel, hissed Representative D.U.D.E of the Vespidian Collective, their compound eyes reflecting the holographic display showing Earth's first warp-capable vessel breaking the light barrier in a rather inelegant but undeniably effective fashion. They weren't supposed to figure that out for at least another century. That's not even the worst part, gargled Ambassador Flub Glorp, a gelatinous entity who communicated through carefully controlled bubble formations. Do you realize what their ship is powered by? Their primitive fission reactor is literally held together with something they call chewing gum and positive thinking. The room erupted into chaos once more. Some representatives began molting in distress. The Grand Scholar VKLX of the Cerebellian minds rose from their hovering meditation platform, neural tendrils twitching irritably. Perhaps I should remind the Council that it was only 50 of their Earth years ago that humans were convinced the atom was the smallest unit of matter. Now they've managed to harness quantum tunneling using equipment that looks like it was assembled in what they call a garage. Their approach defies all logical progression, chittered Technarch Des. They skipped at least 3 standard developmental phases. It's as if they don't care about the proper order of scientific discovery. The holographic display shifted to show various human technologies, each more perplexing than the last. Spacecraft with clearly improvised modifications, power systems with components obviously repurposed from unrelated devices. The most alarming footage showed a human engineer fixing a complex plasma conduit while apparently guided by nothing more than what the translator identified as vibes. Their military capabilities must be assessed immediately, insisted General Krovax, the exoskeleton-clad representative of the hegemony. If they can build weapons with the same unorthodox creativity, they could disrupt the entire galactic balance of power. High Counselor D.U.D.E's bioluminescent patterns finally stabilized into the formal pattern of reluctant acceptance of an unpleasant duty. The Council has no choice but to initiate first contact protocols earlier than anticipated, they announced gravely. We cannot allow humans to expand further into space without proper guidance. But what about the Accords? Whispered an aide, referring to the ancient agreement that prohibited interference with developing species until they had achieved certain cultural and technological benchmarks. D.U.D.E's tentacles formed the gesture equivalent of an exasperated sigh. The Accords didn't anticipate a species that would repair a quantum fluctuation stabilizer with what they call a good whack and some luck. We must contact them before they accidentally unravel the fabric of reality, because someone named Dave from engineering had what humans call a hunch. And thus, with grave reluctance and no small amount of existential dread, the Galactic Council prepared to formally meet humanity completely unaware that they were about to discover that human soldiers were the least of their concerns. The Council's majestic diplomatic vessel, the harmonious convergence that descended through Earth's atmosphere with all the grace and dignity befitting the representatives of the 17 most advanced civilizations in the known galaxy. Its crystalline hull shimmered with defensive fields, specifically calibrated to withstand every known weapon in humanity's arsenal which, according to their intelligence, primarily consisted of things that go boom and slightly bigger things that go boom. What the ship wasn't calibrated for, however, was the tremendous amount of radio chatter and electromagnetic noise that Earth constantly produced. The ship's sensors, accustomed to the regulated and orderly transmissions of civilized worlds, were practically screaming in digital pain. How do they function with this much informational pollution? Asked Communication Officer D.U.D.E, their antenna quivering with sensory overload. They're broadcasting everything from entertainment to personal communications to, is that a recipe for something called tuna casserole? Focus Officer, commanded Ambassador Quailox, adjusting their ceremonial robe of office. We have prepared for this moment for decades. The diplomatic protocols are clear. The harmonious convergence landed precisely at the designated coordinates in front of the United Nations building in New York, where Earth's political representatives had gathered to welcome their first alien visitors. The landing ramp extended with perfect hydraulic precision, and atmospheric analyzers confirmed the air was safe, if distressingly filled with pollutants the Council had banned several millennia ago. Ambassador Quailox led the delegation down the ramp, their segmented exoskeleton gleaming under Earth's harsh sun. Behind them came representatives from each Council species, a carefully orchestrated procession designed to showcase galactic diversity while subtly demonstrating technological supremacy. Earth's representatives stood in a neat row, their expressions varying from awe to trepidation. Everything was proceeding according to the First Contact Protocol Handbook, Section 7, Paragraph 12, until a human who definitely wasn't supposed to be there stepped forward. Hi there. Jack Wheeler, Engineering Department, said the human, extending a hand toward Ambassador Quailox. Sorry about the mess, we weren't expecting company until next week. Ambassador Quailox's translator struggled to pass the casual greeting, their compound eyes blinking in confusion. According to the briefing, they were supposed to be meeting President Elena Martinez, not a Jack Wheeler from engineering. Where is your designated planetary representative? Quailox inquired stiffly, ignoring the extended hand. Oh, she's stuck in traffic, Jack shrugged. Some protesters blocked the highway. Something about aliens being a government conspiracy or whatever. Anyway, they asked me to show you around while we wait because I helped design the communication array that picked up your signals. From the back of the Council delegation, Science Officer T. Zilak whispered urgently, "That doesn't match our intelligence." The array that detected our presence was supposed to be a top-secret military installation. Jack grinned, completely oblivious to the diplomatic crisis unfolding. "You want some coffee while we wait? Just brewed a fresh pot." Before anyone could consult the First Contact Protocol Handbook regarding the proper response to beverage offerings, Jack had already turned and was leading them toward the building. The Council delegation followed in stunned silence, their carefully rehearsed diplomatic speeches abandoned. Inside what appeared to be a hastily cleaned conference room, Jack poured dark liquid into small containers. "Careful, it's hot," he warned, handing one to Quailox, whose appendages instinctively accepted it despite diplomatic training screaming otherwise. "Our analysis indicated humans require this stimulant to function," murmured xenobiologist Meraran Thal. "Perhaps this is a ritual demonstration of their dependence." What happened next would later be referred to in Council records as the incident. Ambassador Quailox, attempting to show respect for human customs, took a sip of the coffee. Their species, however, processed caffeine very differently than humans. The resulting neurological cascade caused all four of Quailox's eyes to dilate simultaneously as their exoskeleton turned a brilliant shade of purple, a color their species only displayed during mating season. "Sweet merciful galaxies," Quailox chittered in their native tongue, the translator failing to activate as their neural pathways temporarily short-circuited. They began vibrating at approximately 3 times their normal frequency. Jack stared in horror. "Oh shit! Are you allergic? Should I call someone? Do you guys have space EpiPens or something?" The rest of the delegation erupted into chaos. Medical Officer BRGIGs rushed forward with emergency detoxification tools, while Security Chief Kravik deployed a containment field, assuming they were under chemical attack. President Martinez chose that exact moment to finally arrive, walking into what looked like an alien medical emergency, combined with a security lockdown, while a wide-eyed engineer frantically apologized and tried to help by offering water, which only made Quailox's condition worse as their species absorbed liquids through their exoskeleton. And that was how humanity's first official diplomatic contact with the Galactic Council began, not with formal speeches about peace and cooperation, but with an accidental caffeine overdose and an engineer who really shouldn't have been there in the first place. 3 days after the incident, as it was now formally recorded in Council archives, relations between humanity and the galactic community had stabilized into what diplomats optimistically called cautiously progressive dialogue. Ambassador Quailox had recovered from their caffeine-induced diplomatic emergency, though they still occasionally vibrated when startled. The harmonious convergence remained in Earth orbit, serving as the Council's base of operations while the delicate process of integrating humans into the galactic community proceeded. Everything was finally going according to protocol, which made it particularly unfortunate when the ship's primary power core suddenly failed. A catastrophic system failure in progress, announced the ship's AI in a surprisingly calm voice. Core containment destabilizing. Estimated time to complete shutdown, 17 minutes. On the bridge, Captain NX Vatu's exoskeleton paled to the color of extreme distress. How is this possible? This ship underwent full maintenance before our journey. Unknown, Captain, replied Chief Engineer ZT Vex, their manipulator appendages flying over the control surfaces. The quantum stabilization matrix is exhibiting behavior I've never seen before. It's as if the laws of physics are being creative. Down on Earth, the human delegation was in session with Council representatives when the emergency communication came through. Grand Minister D.U.D.E was in the middle of explaining the 17,000-page membership application process when their communication device emitted a series of urgent beeps. "Excuse me," they said, stepping aside to receive the message, their expression difficult to read for humans given that it involved the rearrangement of photosensitive spots, grew increasingly alarmed. Jack Wheeler, who had somehow managed to remain part of the human delegation, despite repeated diplomatic requests for his removal, noticed the alien's distress. "Everything okay over there? You're doing that thing with your spots that you did when someone mentioned our nuclear testing program." D.U.D.E hesitated, diplomatic training warring with the urgency of the situation. "The harmonious convergence is experiencing technical difficulties." "What kind of technical difficulties?" Jack asked, perking up instantly. "Nothing that concerns. Their power core is destabilizing and they have about 15 minutes before it goes critical," interrupted Translator Officer Plex, who had not yet mastered the diplomatic art of strategic omission. President Martinez immediately stood. "We must offer assistance. Our space agency can." "With all due respect, Madam President," Jack interrupted, already heading for the door, "your space agency's rockets take 3 months of preparation to launch. I'm guessing we don't have that kind of time." Before anyone could stop him, Jack had pulled out his phone. "Hey, Dina. It's Jack. Remember that experimental teleportation system we've been working on? Yeah, the one that made the lab rat appear inside out that one time. We fixed that, right? Mostly fixed? Good enough. I need it now. And grab my toolkit." D.U.D.E's translator struggled to process the implications of what they'd just heard. "You have teleportation technology? That's at least a Class IV restricted technology under Council law." "We have a lot of things," Jack shrugged. "Most of them don't work quite right yet. But desperate times, you know." 37 minutes later, during which the Harmonious Convergence's AI had updated its catastrophic failure countdown with increasing urgency, Jack Wheeler materialized in the engine room of the alien vessel, his hair standing straight up and smoking slightly, clutching a battered red toolbox. "Holy crap, it worked," he exclaimed, patting himself down to ensure all parts had arrived in their correct configurations. "And I'm not inside out. Dina's getting a raise." The ship's engineering crew stared in shock as the human casually strolled up to their sacred quantum core, a technology representing the pinnacle of 17 civilizations, like combined scientific knowledge, and whistled. "Well, there's your problem," Jack said, pointing to a section of the core that appeared perfectly normal to everyone else. "You've got quantum resonance cascade feedback. Happens all the time with these models." "These models?" Chief Engineer ZT Vex sputtered. "This is a one-of-a-kind harmonic quantum core, designed by the greatest minds in the galaxy." Yeah, but you're still using isolinear quantum pathways instead of non-linear resonance matrices, Jack replied, already digging through his toolbox. Basic design flaw. We ran into the same issue with our prototype. You have quantum core technology. Steve X's voice rose to an alarming pitch. Sort of, Jack shrugged. It's more of a hobby project in my garage. Anyway, I'm gonna need some space. And maybe hold this for me? He handed a bewildered alien assistant what appeared to be an ordinary thermos. It's my special coffee. Engineered it myself. Caffeine content would kill a horse, but it keeps me focused. What followed was 43 minutes of the most horrifying technical improvisation the Council engineers had ever witnessed. Jack bypassed safety systems that existed specifically because bypassing them could theoretically tear a hole in reality. He rerouted power through systems never designed to handle such loads. At one point he asked for the alien equivalent of duct tape, and when told no such thing existed, he produced his own roll from his toolkit. You carry adhesive strips with you? Asked an astonished technical officer. Rule number 1 of engineering, Jack replied, tearing a strip with his teeth while simultaneously holding 2 incompatible power conduits together. Always have duct tape. By the time Jack declared the repair complete, he had violated 47 different safety regulations in the Council's Engineering Protocols Handbook, used tools in ways their manufacturers would explicitly prohibit, and somehow improved the core's efficiency by 12%. There. Good as new, Jack announced, stepping back from the core, which now hummed with stable energy, albeit with an occasional concerning pulse of blue light that definitely hadn't been there before. I added a little bypass circuit that should prevent this from happening again. Probably. Chief Engineer Steve X stared at the core in a mixture of horror and fascination. What is that component? They asked, pointing to a small device Jack had installed. Oh, that's from my garage door opener, Jack said casually. Turns out the frequency modulator works great for stabilizing quantum fluctuations. Who knew? Who knew? The Council engineers exchanged glances that transcended species barriers, a universal look of technical professionals witnessing something that shouldn't work but somehow did. Oh, and you might want to avoid using the ship's matter replicators for making anything you're going to eat, Jack added as he packed up his tools. I had to borrow some parts from the molecular pattern buffer. Nothing critical, though. Probably. News of the human engineer's unorthodox repair of the harmonious convergence's quantum core spread through the galactic community faster than a tachyon burst. While the Council's official report described the incident in carefully sanitized language, emergency assistance was rendered by Earth representatives utilizing alternative methodologies. The engineers who witnessed it firsthand told a different story in the galaxy's equivalent of bars. The human used a beverage container component to regulate plasma flow, exclaimed Junior Engineer Krilvez to a crowd of their fellow Zentari engineers. It's a container for liquid sustenance. Impossible, scoffed Senior Designer XD Law. The thermal output alone would. That's what we thought too. Krilvez's antennae quivered with excitement. But the human said something about vacuum insulation and good enough for government work, and then just did it. Similar conversations were happening throughout the galaxy as the tale of the human repair job grew more outlandish with each retelling. By the time it reached the Proxima Centauri trading hub, the story claimed Jack Wheeler had fixed a quantum singularity using only dental floss and a musical device called a kazoo. The problem began when other species decided to experiment with what they now called human engineering techniques. On Regal V, a group of Rigelian mechanics attempted to repair a planetary defense shield using improvised components and what they believed was the human approach of winging it. The resulting power surge turned the entire northern continent's population temporarily translucent. On Teoseti, the prestigious Technical Institute conducted a controlled experiment to test whether human-style improvisation could improve their propulsion systems. The test ship achieved speeds previously thought impossible for approximately 7 seconds before transforming into a flock of what observers could only describe as space geese. The final straw came when the Andorian Science Directorate, attempting to boost their quantum communication network using human intuitive engineering, accidentally linked their system to an alternate dimension populated entirely by entities that communicated exclusively through elaborate tap dancing routines. An emergency council session was quickly convened. "This madness must stop," declared High Councillor D.U.D.E, tentacles waving in agitation. "In just 3 standard weeks, we have recorded 172 major technological disasters directly attributable to species attempting to employ human engineering methods. But the human methods produce results." Uncan, argued Representative Jorex of the Tayao Seti Technical Institute, still occasionally shimmering into transparency a side effect of their experiments. Their disregard for established principles allows for innovative solutions. "Innovative?" sputtered Grand Scholar Vrok'Nar. "The harmonic quantum core of our flagship now makes a ping sound every 37 minutes and occasionally generates miniature rainbows. That's not innovation, that's technological absurdity." Security footage from the harmonious convergence played on the chamber's main display, showing Jack Wheeler's repair process. Council engineers who hadn't witnessed it firsthand watched in horror as Jack used his multi-tool to bypass 3 different critical safety systems while whistling something his audio file identified as highway to the danger zone. "The most disturbing aspect," continued Vrok'Nar, "is that we cannot remove his modifications without destabilizing the entire system. He has created what our engineers describe as a technical paradox, a repair that should not work and yet cannot be undone because it does work. I propose," intoned General Krovax, "that we classify human engineering techniques as a Class 3 galactic hazard, placing them in the same category as quantum viruses and self-aware computer malware." "Isn't that excessive?" asked Ambassador Flub-Glorp, bubbling nervously. "Excessive?" Krovax's battle mandibles clicked in agitation. "Did you not see the report from Sirius B? Their attempt to enhance their agricultural systems using human trial and error methods resulted in sentient vegetables that are now demanding voting rights and preparations for salad." After hours of heated debate, the Council officially classified human engineering approaches as a technical hazard requiring containment and observation. All Council species were explicitly forbidden from attempting to replicate human engineering methods without proper oversight, and a special committee was formed to study and potentially standardize the safer aspects of human technical intuition. Jack Wheeler, blissfully unaware that he had just been classified as more dangerous than most biological weapons, was back in his garage on Earth, happily tinkering with what he called a slight improvement. The Council provided communication device unaware that his modifications would soon accidentally tap into the quantum thoughts of a gas giant's atmosphere in the Andromeda galaxy. The Galactic Council had just begun implementing their human engineering containment protocols when disaster struck. The Vrok'Nar, an ancient automated defense system from a long-extinct civilization, suddenly reactivated along the galaxy's outer rim. Dormant for millennia, the system consisted of self-replicating drones programmed to eliminate anything they classified as a threat which, unfortunately, that included pretty much all current galactic civilizations. The Council's emergency session had been running for 26 consecutive hours as reports of destroyed outposts and overwhelmed defense fleets continued to pour in. "Our mathematical models indicate the Vrok'Nar will reach core worlds within 17 days, reported strategic analyst D.U.D.E. Their typically pristine holographic presentation now marred with ominous red expansion patterns. The conventional weapons are ineffective, and the drones adapt to our tactics faster than we can implement them. There must be a solution." High Councillor D.U.D.E.'s skin had faded to a pale blue, the color of extreme distress. The combined knowledge of 17 advanced civilizations, 23 now, corrected an aide, referring to the recently admitted species, should be capable of addressing this threat. The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. Their conventional approaches were failing. The Vrok'Nar operated on technology principles so alien that they defied standard analysis. What they needed was an unconventional solution. "Perhaps," ventured Ambassador Quilox carefully, "we should consider consulting the humans." Gasps echoed through the chamber. General Krovax's exoskeleton rattled with indignation. "You cannot be serious. Their technological approach has been classified as a hazard." "Precisely," Quilox replied. We need a hazard to combat a greater hazard. After much debate and several minor molting incidents among the more stress-susceptible species, a formal request for assistance was transmitted to Earth. The Council expected humanity to send their top military strategists, political leaders, and perhaps a carefully selected group of conventional scientists. What they got instead was Jack Wheeler and what he cheerfully described as my buddies from the engineering department. The human delegation arrived on the harmonious convergence in what appeared to be a hastily modified transport shuttle that, according to scan reports, contained no fewer than 13 technological modifications that violated Council safety standards. The lead Council technician noted with alarm that the human vessel's engine cowling appeared to be held together with what Earth databases identified as zip ties. Thanks for the invite, Jack announced as he bounded onto the bridge, followed by 5 other humans in various states of dishevelment. We brought snacks and some ideas. Oh, and the quantum core is making that ping sound because I had to use a microwave magnetron in the repair. It's totally fine, just don't stand next to it when it happens. High Councillor Zithbar's protocol officer whispered urgently. We requested military assistance. Where are their strategic commanders? Oh, the generals are still arguing over jurisdiction and preparing a formal response, Jack explained, unpacking what appeared to be food items and scattered technical components onto the sacred council table. Should be ready in about 3 weeks. We figured you didn't have that kind of time, so we just came ourselves. But you are engineers, stated Grand Scholar Vrok'Nar, the word engineers carrying the same tonal weight as one might say harbingers of chaos. Yep, replied a woman who introduced herself as Dinah Chen, Chief of Experimental Applications. We've been studying your data packets on the Vrok'Nar, fascinating adaptive technology. Reminds me of our prototype self-modifying code, but with better fashion sense. The humans immediately commandeered a section of the ship's laboratory, transforming it into what they called a workshop, but what the Council security team described as a controlled explosion of technological anarchy. They requested access to the ship's technical specifications, historical data on the Vrok'Nar, and most alarmingly, a permission to borrow components from several critical ship systems. Just temporarily, assured Miguel Rodriguez, another engineer, who specialized in what he described as making things talk to other things that definitely shouldn't be talking to each other. For 72 standard hours, the human team worked in rotation, fueled by their stimulant beverages and what appeared to be genuine excitement about the challenge. Council scientists observed with a mixture of horror and fascination as the humans violated virtually every technical protocol in existence. They're cross-wiring a quantum entanglement communicator with parts from the waste reclamation system, whispered one observer to another. That's not just unconventional, it's technically obscene. At one point, Jack was discovered in a restricted area, attempting to access the ship's dimensional stabilizers. What possible reason could you have for modifying our dimensional systems? Demanded Security Chief Kravik. We need to make the Vrok'Nar think they're in a different dimensional phase than they actually are, Jack explained, as if this were the most obvious thing in the universe. Like when you throw a tennis ball for a dog, but hide it behind your back. The dog runs off looking for it, and everybody has a good laugh. Except in this case, the dog is a swarm of genocidal ancient drones, and the tennis ball is, all of reality. Before the Council could properly process this alarming analogy, the human team announced they had a solution. What they presented to the Council leadership looked like a haphazard collection of mismatched components, wires spilling out at concerning angles, with several parts clearly repurposed from their original functions. We call it the D.U.D.E, announced Jack proudly. Which stands for, prompted High Councillor Zithbar. Dimensional Unstable Disruption Emitter, replied Dina. Though honestly, we came up with the acronym first and worked backward. It's actually more of a HUDE since we had to use hydraulics instead of the quantum matrix, added Miguel, but DUDE sounds cooler. The device, they explained, would emit a signal that would essentially trick the Vrok'Nar drones into thinking they existed in a slightly different dimensional phase than everything else, rendering their weapons ineffective and their targeting systems confused. And you're certain this will work? Asked Grand Scholar Vrok'Nar skeptically. Jack and his team exchanged glances. "Define certain," Jack replied with a grin that did nothing to inspire confidence. The deployment of the D.U.D.E system was, in the carefully measured words of the official Council After Action report, an unprecedented technological event with significant paradigm-altering implications. In the considerably less measured words of those who witnessed it firsthand, it was absolute madness that somehow saved us all. The Council's flagship, accompanied by a fleet of their most advanced vessels, approached the leading edge of the Vrok'Nar swarm. The ancient defense system had already consumed 3 uninhabited systems, breaking down matter at the molecular level to create more of itself. The swarm now resembled a metallic cloud of trillions of interconnected machines, each the size of a small transport but collectively functioning as a single devastating entity. On the bridge of the harmonious convergence, tension had reached levels that caused several officers' natural camouflage to activate involuntarily, making them blend into their stations. "The D.U.D.E is ready for activation," reported Jack, who had somehow been granted emergency bridge access despite the security team's increasingly desperate objections. "Just need to wait for the swarm to get within range." "And what exactly is the range?" asked Captain NX-2. "We'll know when we get there," Jack replied cheerfully, making adjustments to a control panel that had been cobbled together from parts of the ship's food replication system and what appeared to be a modified entertainment console. As the Vrok'Nar swarm detected the approaching fleet, it shifted direction with terrifying efficiency, billions of components moving in perfect coordination. The leading edge formed into an attack configuration that the tactical officers noted with alarm closely resembled the fleet's own formation. The swarm was already adapting to it in their approach. "They're scanning us," reported Science Officer D.U.D.E. "Our countermeasures are failing, they're accessing our databases." "Perfect," exclaimed Jack, surprising everyone. "That means they're establishing a connection." "Miguel, hit it." Miguel Rodriguez, monitoring the D.U.D.E from engineering, acknowledged with a thumbs up through the video feed. "Activating Phase 1. Everybody hang on to something." What happened next defied conventional explanation. The D.U.D.E emitted a pulse that, according to the ship's sensors, briefly caused reality itself to hiccup. For exactly 3.72 seconds, everything in a 12 light-minute radius existed in what the technical team would later describe as a quantum superposition of being and not being, like Schrödinger's cat, but for an entire section of the galaxy. The Vrok'Nar swarm froze in space. Then, in a display that would have been beautiful if it weren't so terrifying, the entirety of the ancient automated defense system began to vibrate at a frequency visible to the naked eye. "It's working," Dina exclaimed, watching the readings from her jerry-rigged monitoring station. "They're experiencing complete dimensional dissonance." "In English," demanded General Krovax. "They think they're in the wrong universe," Jack translated. "Their programming is telling them they exist in a different dimensional phase than everything else, which means either everything else is a non-threat or they themselves are a dimensional anomaly that needs to be corrected." On the main view screen, the swarm began to reconfigure itself, component drones connecting and disconnecting in increasingly chaotic patterns. "They're trying to adapt," reported D.U.D.E, attempting to recalibrate their dimensional sensors. "And that's our cue for Phase 2, Jack said with a grin. "Dina, you're up." Dina Chen pressed a sequence on her control panel that, suspiciously, included what appeared to be an old Earth video game controller, initiating recursive feedback loop. The D.U.D.E emitted a second pulse, this one targeting the Vrok'Nar's newly established adaptation protocols. As the ancient system attempted to recalibrate its dimensional perception, the pulse essentially convinced it that its recalibration was itself a dimensional anomaly. "We're making it doubt its own existence," Jack explained to the bewildered council representatives. "It's like telling a computer this statement is false and forcing it to process that paradox forever." The effect on the Vrok'Nar was immediate and spectacular. Unable to resolve the dimensional paradox, the swarm began executing its core programming on itself, identifying its own components as dimensional threats. The massive cloud of ancient technology began consuming itself, each drone attacking those nearest to it in a cascade of self-destruction. Within hours, the once invincible Vrok'Nar had reduced itself to scattered debris and inert components, floating harmlessly in space. "I can't believe that worked," whispered Captain NX-Vatu, forgetting their microphone was still on. "To be fair, neither could we," admitted Jack with a shrug. "We gave it about a 60-40 chance of success versus, accidentally erasing this arm of the galaxy from existence." The bridge fell silent as the implications of that casual admission sank in. In the aftermath of what became known as the Vrok'Nar incident, the Galactic Council found itself in the uncomfortable position of having to formally acknowledge that human engineering methods, while wildly unorthodox and potentially catastrophic, had saved the galaxy from an extinction-level threat. The solution required the creation of an entirely new classification, provisional hazardous asset. Humans would be permitted to continue their unique approach to engineering, but under strict supervision and only in controlled environments or dire emergencies. When asked to explain how they had conceived of such an unconventional solution, Jack Wheeler provided an answer that was duly recorded in the Council archives and subsequently became required reading for all species studying human behavior. "We just looked at what we had, what we needed, and filled in the gap with duct tape and optimism. Sometimes the universe gives you lemons, and sometimes it gives you an ancient swarm of killer robots. Either way, you make do with what you've got." 6 months later, during a ceremonial dinner celebrating the new alliance between Earth and the Galactic Council, the High Counselor Zithbar posed a question that had been puzzling the Council since first contact. "We have observed your species in conflict," they said to President Martinez. "Your soldiers are formidable, but not exceptionally more so than other species. Yet your engineers terrify our security analysts. Why is this evolutionary disparity so pronounced?" President Martinez smiled and glanced at Jack, who was currently explaining to a horrified counselor how he had slightly modified his dinner utensils to better handle the alien cuisine. "It's quite simple," she replied. "When our soldiers break the rules, they face court-martial. When our engineers break the rules and it works, we call it innovation and give them funding. And natural selection at its finest." Across the galaxy, new safety regulations were being implemented, all specifically designed to address potential human engineering scenarios. The most prominent, displayed in every technical facility in Council space, read simply, "Warning. In case of human engineers, evacuate immediately and hope they know what they're doing." And beneath that, in smaller text, "Note, they probably don't. But somehow it usually works anyway."